Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May 7th special council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Anyone like to adopt the agenda? Councillor Forrest, all in favor? Carried. Moving on to 3.1, 2026 operating budget presented by Mr. Tim.
Through Mr. Mayor, Council, a real pleasure to be here. Just to make sure that the agenda reads correctly, it's the 2026 operating and capital budget.
3.1 is just operating budget.
Oh, okay.
Go line by line.
Oh, they're separate. Okay, perfect. First, I'd just like to maybe begin just saying it's great to be back. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I really reflected on the council meeting last time and I actually went back, talked to my team, and I was actually very impressed with the council. I've been very impressed with your administration team. And one of the unique things I just wanted to make sure is very clear is this is exciting because the town of High Level has a unique opportunity in that many municipalities that we work with, I presented, I think this will be my third or fourth budget presentation in the last couple of weeks, but many municipalities we work with are very strapped from a financial perspective. They're near, maybe 75% of their debt capacity. They're lacking reserves. They don't have growth. Their grants are in bad shape. Your situation is one of opportunity. You have strong, very little debt. You have strong reserves in place. Your grants at this time, just for an awareness, I took a look at them today. You have a lot of deferred revenue in place, meaning that your grants have not been fully utilized. There's a lot of opportunity. And basically, I wanted to thank again and maybe make sure that you're aware that your CAO, who engaged us, was very clear at the very beginning of this that she wanted to have us come in and develop a financial plan and a budget that supported council's priorities, that also supported that you as a council want to see things get done. And she said, we're not sure where we are with this, and we'd like your team to take a look at this and maybe see if there's some things we can do to engage, what council wants from a party perspective and engage that we can get things done. And from looking at it, I can tell you there is a lot that can get done, and this budget's going to reflect that. We also recognize that we probably need more time to go over your long-term priorities, a good strategic plan, those types of things. But that said, what we put in this budget, we believe is achievable. It's very ambitious, but at the same time, it covers off a lot of bases. And so I just want to start off again, in our short time working with you, your sales has been very strong in her direction to us in terms of leading us and telling us what she wants and what she thinks council needs. Your admin team's been great to work with. We've done a lot of work with them. I had a teammate up here for a full week working on them with business cases for budget and capital and those sorts of things. And again, I'm very optimistic, and where a lot of times I'm kind of in a budget presentation saying, this is we got to tighten our belts, or we're going to have to do make some real challenging decisions. We've had to make some challenging decisions in this budget, but at the same time, you have an opportunity, and I'm really open to discussing that tonight. So with that, I'll begin. The budget presentation purpose tonight, again, is to present you with the final draft of the operating and capital budget. Under the Municipal Government Act, we have to pass an operating and capital budget each year, again, and they have to be balanced. We're going to go over our assumptions with you tonight and talk about organizational impacts. There have been some things that we've changed. And some things that we've looked at in terms of actuals, and did a pretty extensive review in terms of the way that you're organized, making sure that things are working the way they should from a financial perspective. We're going to talk about some expenditure reductions that we've made and some operational changes. I think the key thing here is that we right-sized your budget to what you were actually spending. And so I think we made a number of corrections that have resulted in some pretty significant cost savings, which is my understanding from your sale was what council wanted to see. So we have a unique opportunity tonight to be one of the probably only municipalities in Alberta that can say we have an ambitious budget, but at the same time we have a tax decrease. And that's a really unique situation. And I'm very confident this is actually a very responsible budget. And that's very, very rare that we see tax decreases, yet it's still a really good budget with a lot of good things in it to see us grow and flourish. We're proposing a tax strategy and reserve contribution within this budget. So again, even though we're seeing a tax decrease, we still have ample funds to go into reserve for your long-term financial sustainability, whether it be capital, whether it be operations. We have an opportunity to, again, meet council's priorities, whatever they may be over the coming years. Have looked, and this budget is in alignment with good financial health. We are going to be recommending some debt this evening. We're going to be recommending some use of reserves. We're certainly going to be recommending some use of grants, but I can tell you that this has been reviewed by people who work with me. They're all CPAs with decades of experience in municipal government, and we believe that the budget that we're recommending is responsible, sustainable, and does not put a strain on your financial resources. It's just simply a budget that gets things done. We're also going to be looking at, again, tonight, the request for you to approve this budget tonight, so the operating capital budget. And here's something that's key. There is time. If you feel that there's changes that need to be made or you're not comfortable, I can come back, but we do have to move quickly because we need to get your tax notices out. We have to do the tax rate bylaw, tax notices. We have to start collecting the money to make this happen. The second part of it too is that we are going to be presenting a fairly ambitious capital budget. I heard very clearly the last time I was here, we want to see things get done. And that's what this capital budget is intending to do. But that also means we have to hustle as soon as this budget's passed to get into the procurement process, requests for proposals, and we have to hire contractors to get the work done. And so we're going to have to move fairly quickly with this capital budget. So municipalities, as I mentioned last time, are in the quality of life businesses. As I present this budget tonight, I'm not going to go through the immense detail that I did last time, but this is a key thing that I truly believe in, and I'm always excited about when I'm passing a budget, is that it's more than just numbers. It's really about providing quality of life for people. And with the councils I've worked with over the last 30 years, the great ones recognize that as we start to build, as we start to look at making changes to services, as we start adding capital projects, it's really about building a community and making things great for people. And so we do that through roads and infrastructure, water utilities, fire and emergency services, parks and recreation, community services, governance. The list goes on and on. There isn't a day that people do not receive value from the taxes and the utility rates that they utilize. We get up in the morning and walk on a sidewalk that's been taken care of by your public works department. We drive on a road that's been taken care of from a traffic safety perspective from engineers. We drive through a community that's manicured, the grass is cut, and we see the flowers, from your public works department. And again, this isn't a day that we don't receive value of some type in this budget, and that's what this budget represents. The thing that's important also is that my team has a long-standing reputation of being very, very strong in our ability to develop budgets that are realistic, that take action, and ensure that the town's financial sustainability is safe. And so there's a few principles that we have. We're conservative in our revenue forecasts, so we would rather be low than high. There's an old saying. One of my mentors many years ago said to me, Tim, we may get criticized on occasion for surpluses because people say, well, you're taxing us too much. How come you didn't spend the money? Those types of things. But just see what happens when you run a deficit. So being conservative is, to me, a very strong principle. And having good financial controls during the year as well is very important as we start to develop, again, budgets and then start the reporting process. And so revenue forecasts in this budget have been deemed as conservative. We don't have any reliance on uncertain grants. Again, one of the key things about grants is they're very much a dying art form, basically, in municipal government. We don't get a lot for operating anymore, some for capital, but this budget isn't dependent on grants that won't materialize. And so if we do have grants, they've been put in here very, very conservatively. Capital grants have been excluded from the operating base budget, and so that is something that we found that you had an issue with before. Capital was in your operating, and that's not the way it's supposed to be accounted for, and so we've cleaned that up. Debt obligations are planned within operations, and so anything that we've identified as potential debt, we're also looking at the potential payments in the long term as well, and recognizing that that will still result in reasonable tax increases in this year's budget, but also in years to come. And so making sure that this isn't going to be a challenge for the ratepayers if we take out some debt. Again, it's very reasonable in terms of the principal payments and interest payments. And then finally, again, this budget will support long-term resilience, and so we're making sure that the decisions we make today are in the context of tomorrow. And so this budget, we feel, is responsible, gets a lot done. It's ambitious, but at the same time, financially is sustainable. And that is a thing that, to me, is very important for municipalities. I will say this, that I've worked in a lot of municipalities over the years, and it's very, very key to note that if you're good with the money, then everything else becomes easy. And I mean that sincerely. Municipalities that have a really strong understanding of debt, grant use, how to manage operations and taxes are typically the municipalities that succeed, not just in financial sustainability, but in service delivery, building projects, and developing a better quality of life for their residents. And so we're very kind of keen on making sure that as we start to plan for operations within our operating budget, it also plans for, again, the future sustainability from a finance perspective. It's smart in the way that we approach things. It's like a business, okay? Now, budget at a glance. So we have $19.4 million in revenues. Our total expenditure budget is $17.4 million, which is giving us a reserve contribution of $2,008,000. The one thing that's very important to note, and I will go over some detail here shortly, is that we also were able to find organizational savings of just over $1 million, and that is significant for the town of High Level. And so we're ambitious in our ability to, again, generate the services, and again, kind of push ourselves organizationally. One of the things that Viv was adamant about is that we looked at organizing the budget in a way that actually matched the services so we could do a little bit better job of performance management and making sure that we could organize ourselves in the way that we were actually delivering the services. And so the budget is now organized in a different way. Again, Viv was very adamant that she wanted to see us work well and be able to deliver on what we said that we're going to do. So we were able to find organizational savings of just over $1 million, and that's resulted in a 3.8 tax dollar reduction. We also have a 0% increase in utility rates going forward and 0% increase in fees and charges. So these are very positive things from a financial perspective. I will put one caveat on this, that one strong recommendation I would have in the long term is that as we start looking at your long-term capital plan, there is a lot of requirements for water, sewer infrastructure, and that could result in a need for utility rate increase in the future. So again, strong recommendation is that a budget is always just the beginning. It's certainly not an end, but a strong recommendation I would make is start looking at a long-term financial plan for utility and look at those rates at some point. But as it stands today, this is, again, like I said before, a very unique opportunity that I don't get to see very often, where we're actually improving things in the budget from an operational perspective, but at the same time, we're able to lower taxes and not have any toll on the residents from a tax rate, utility rate, or fees and charges perspective. And so a really, really strong budget, in my opinion, from a taxpayer perspective. Risks, considerations, and the path forward is one of the things that is unique about your town that is not normal or not unique across, again, all of Alberta, is you're growing, and you're growing significantly. Your population growth has been significant over the last 10 years, and that's a really great opportunity. But again, risk considerations and a path forward is growth is something I'm always somewhat conservative about, because you never know if it's going to continue. So though we've absorbed and we've utilized growth to help support the tax decrease in this year, again, from a long-term financial plan perspective, we want to make sure council's aware this may not continue. One of the key things that municipalities all across Canada, in fact, probably pretty much across the world, are experiencing is inflation challenges in today's world. As you're all aware, because of basically conflict that's going on in our world, inflationary pressures have increased significantly in some of the main supplies and materials that municipalities buy. We buy a lot of fuel. We buy a lot of road oil. We buy a lot of concrete and asphalt and things like that. And those types of commodities have increased significantly. We're also seeing significant increase in some of our utilities and other sales and goods and services, those types of things, and those have all been basically taken into consideration in this budget. And so again, conservative in our revenues, but again, somewhat aggressive in the way that we've approached inflation on our cost to make sure that we have enough money to cover off the things that we need. Provincial funding uncertainty always remains, as you're aware. It seems that there isn't a day that we don't hear about something from a provincial perspective where we might be at risk in terms of losing funding, changes to the way that they're funding schools or roads or whatever it might be, and that is something that we always have to be aware of. And so municipalities are finding, and this has been something I've experienced now for 3 decades, is slowly over time, municipalities are having to become more and more reliant on themselves, basically from a financial perspective. And I'm a big proponent of believe it or not, doing that. Many years ago, I can still remember the CEO of Strathcona County said to me, he says, "I don't believe in grants, municipal, provincial grants." And I didn't understand that. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we not want grants? And what I realized he meant was he didn't believe in reliance on them because we can't depend on it. So what this budget does, in my opinion, is sets you up for success in becoming independent regardless of provincial grants or not. And so that's what we're working towards from, again, both your operating budget perspective and your capital budget. We are looking at the development of the 5-year, 10 and long-term financial plan. Again, we've done your capital plan. We've looked at your operations, and so we've done a 3-year forecast and a 5-year capital plan, which is mandatory for municipalities. But I will say this, you know, I want to thank Viv for bringing us on to this, this engagement. But I'll also say that the work that we've done in a few months is usually done over a year. And so we've been really fast tracking this project, and Viv's been really pushing my team, and she's pretty good at kind of pushing us around, which is a good thing. But all kidding aside, we've done a lot of work in a very short amount of time, but there is work left to be done, and that's really in your long-term plan. Like I said, the town of High Level is in a unique situation because you have so much financial capacity from a capital perspective, particularly that there's opportunities, and that has to be looked at, and that has to be discussed with council from a party perspective. We have to find some time with you, and we know that your time is short, but again, we want to make sure that this is a council budget. That is the key to success in municipal government. Is you're the leaders, you're the boss, and that means that we need to get an understanding of what your priorities are. We think we've hit the mark here from what we've heard from you, but if we haven't, we'd like to know that. But again, this is really in your long-term plans that we need to understand. Again, we want to continue our reserve building. Again, one of the things I have to state, and this is something that I'm very particular about, is I believe in enabling a council by making sure that we spend money the right way, that we utilize debt, that we utilize grants, that we utilize reserves, but we also have always a keen eye on replenishing them, so that we're not emptying the bank and setting our future councils or our future residents up for failure by overspending. And so by using these basically funding vehicles properly, but also looking at replenishing them, we can usually stay sustainable and again have continued success, not short-term success. So something I believe this budget actually does achieve. We also took a priority-based approach. So again, talking to Viv, she said she wants this to be in the context of council priorities. I'll admit that was a little bit of a challenge for us because we couldn't find time with you to sit down and really kind of go through, you know, in a detailed manner what your priorities are from a strategic perspective and an operations service perspective and capital perspective. But we believe that we hit the mark fairly well. And again, really open to that discussion tonight. We listened very closely to your concerns and your comments from the last meeting, and we hope to make enough change in this budget that you would agree that this does meet your priorities. We did go through department by department, and again, this is something Viv pushed very much, that she wanted things organized and very clear in terms of like a strong structure that matched how you're actually delivering your services so that we could make decisions from a financial perspective. And so we did that. And so there's been a lot of review that went into this to make sure that the budgets are correct and that they're also measurable from an accountability perspective. We went through staffing and we went through operations and also did some service level evaluations. And again, that was just simply talking with your team about if we, you know, we're reducing costs in certain areas, would this hurt the budget, or are there reasons why money wasn't spent, or if we made some changes in the way that we approached spending our money, would this cause concerns? And what we heard on the most part, that there's not going to be a lot of risk in service level reductions in this budget, though we did reduce costs. Again, conservative in our revenue forecasting, again, we did have long-term financial planning in place and in mind when we actually developed this budget. So the significant organizational savings, now there's many. So I went through this over the last couple of nights, and there was like literally probably 36 areas that we actually cut back in terms of costs according to actuals and some service changes. But these are the big ones. It's basically consultant professional fees is an area that we saw that there could be a significant savings. You spent a lot of money on consultants in the last number of years, and we thought there's an opportunity here to right size this. So that's been cut back. Contracted maintenance, again, this is more of a review of your past actuals, looking at what you've actually spent. We did an extensive review, a 5-year review on this, and found that we could save about $213,000 there. Special programs, $197,000. Ed probably has the detail about that, so I'm giving Ed a bit of a heads up on a question on that one if council has any questions about that. Our contractor repairs, we were able to reduce by $68,000, software maintenance $45,000, and then again greater accountable over in spending in your overall budget. And so there was a lot of areas that, quite frankly, you had too much budget as opposed to what you were actually spending. And so we right-sized that. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that there might be some areas that, there could be some challenges as we go through the reporting process, but we feel confident that we will run a surplus in 2026. We feel that this is, again, a very responsible budget, and we feel we hit the mark on how things should actually be spent in terms of your actuals. Again, this is also a measured and responsible tax strategy, and when we talk about tax strategy, what we mean by that is essentially looking at the long term. We don't like to see significant spikes in taxes in municipal government. We kind of like to see this kind of steady Eddie kind of movement type of thing. And one of the concerns, and I'll be frank, I had a long talk with my team about this, is at first I was very uncomfortable with the tax decrease. We don't usually do them in municipal government. And the reason why is that if your budget is actually correct, then inflation always naturally increases the budget, even if we don't do anything different year to year. Fuel usually costs more. Labor costs more, supplies and materials cost more, so municipal budgets naturally increase regardless of service levels. But in your case, because there was so many corrections to be made in terms of actuals, we were able to do this and your assessment growth. So this was a unique opportunity to see a tax decrease. But again, we also want to recognize, and I want to make sure I say this to council, this may not be something that we can do year after year after year. Probably not. This is probably a 1 year type of thing. The other thing I want to state, again, humbly to council, and again, if you don't agree, of course, you're the boss and the leaders of the community. So we would absolutely listen to your direction on this. But again, you'll probably see increases also attached to the ambitious capital budget and ambitious operations you have as a council. You want to see better quality of life for the residents of the town of High Level. We heard that last time. So this budget is set up to help foster that. But that'll also mean in the future you'll probably have some tax decreases going forward. But people, from my experience, usually are pretty okay with that as long as they see better recreation. They see maybe spray parks. They see better emergency services, and they feel safer in their communities. They see a more aesthetically a beautiful community. Whatever it might be, people are usually okay with small increases year to year to year, as long as they feel that they're getting value from it. And so I think we're setting you up for success with that. The 3.8% tax dollar reduction results in a $212 annual average reduction for a house of $500,000. That's a $17.60 reduction monthly. And again, 0 utility rate increase, 0 fees and charges increase. And again, we feel this balances sustainability and affordability. And so Viv said to me at the beginning of this process that we wanted to see some decreases basically in the budget, and she felt that there was opportunity to do that, and she was right. So we're very happy to say that we don't see a significant, or if, in fact, any service level decreases that are probably proposed in this, but we see a right sizing of the budget and something that's very beneficial to the residents, as they're going to see a bit of a savings this year on their tax bill. Moving along. As I mentioned before, I just put this in for information for you as council and the public that may be watching. Again, as I said before, unique opportunity, high level. You should be excited, and I mean that sincerely. There's a lot of municipalities that would do anything to see this kind of growth. You are a growing community, and you want to make sure that you leverage that into success financially and operationally. Usually growing communities will eventually expect to see increases in service levels of some type, which means better roads, upgraded recreation facilities, maybe a new fire hall. Those are the types of things people expect over time. And as you have a growing population, you start to see a slowly growing assessment base as well. And because of that growing assessment base, eventually you hit a financial threshold that allows you to have the financial capacity to actually build and invest in basically services. You're pretty much at that point now. So there is opportunity on a go-forward basis, not just in this budget, but in future budgets, in my opinion. Your taxation analysis, the reason I wanted to bring this up is you have, again, a very interesting and unique situation. The average for a town of this size is typically, if you're lucky, 80% residential tax and 20% non-res machinery and equipment. You have a residential tax base of 45% is paid for by residents and 55% is paid for by business and industry and those types of things. Now, we know that that's challenged because of shutdowns and things like that, but still, you have a taxation advantage over many municipalities, which means as if you increase your services, it's not just the residents paying for it, it's business paying for it as well, which is, again, a good thing. And typically, businesses are okay with increases to an extent because it usually means better services and supports growth of the community. And again, more residents is good for business. So something that you have an advantage of, in my opinion. So your taxation analysis is proving to be very positive. So again, getting into some detail, and as I mentioned before, the details in the presentation if you want to speak to any of that this evening, but I'm not going to get into the detail as we did that last time. But this is essentially the net of your revenue and your expenses. And again, the difference there is going into reserve. So you have ample revenues with a 3.8% tax dollar decrease to cover off your expenses and still put money in the bank, which is a very positive thing. Now, that's the operating budget. I'm going to stop for a moment to give a bit of a pause before I get to capital and just ask if you have any questions or comments before I get into the capital plan.
I guess my biggest question is when we're looking at the reduction in contract and maintenance, contract repairs. I mean, that when you look through the capital or the operating budget itself, there is some significant differences in there. So I mean, my concern, I guess, is are we going to see service levels going forward? I mean, our 2025 actual was quite high when it came to contract repairs and services. So, I guess were the issues lying there repaired and fixed we won't have to deal with again for this year or for a while? Is that why the reduction is there and it's so high?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think one of the key things is the capital budget's going to respond to that. So before we had contracted services for repairs and maintenance, we're actually looking in the capital budget to do significant upgrades and repairs. And so moving away from basically what I would call Band-Aid fixes to actual real fixes that will make a big difference and the community will really see. So instead of being what I'd call being reactive by having contractors repair things, we're being proactive by rebuilding, refurbishing, and replacing our equipment. And so you'll see a significant capital budget as opposed to significant contracted repairs and those types of things. That said, one thing that's very important to note, in a budget like this, we are also putting away over $2 million into reserve with the savings, which means if something happens that typically would have been covered by those contracted repairs and maintenance, we just come back to council, we can do an amendment to the operating budget, and we can repair things and take care of things. And so this budget is set up to still be reactive if we need to be, but it's set up to be responsible.
Next question, just when we're looking at, again, another reduction there, consultant professional services. I mean, if we look around the room here, we have multiple consultants hired for director positions. So just wondering if there's a reduction there, 1.1 million, where is that funding coming from to pay for these positions?
Through your worship, from the salary and wages for the roles that are vacant.
So I guess the next question then is typically consultants are a lot more expensive than having staff here generally. So I guess are we projecting to have reducing the amount of consultants we have for the next year?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, council?
Yes. For the reserves that are being used, where are they coming from?
The reserves that are being used in the operating budget or capital budget?
The operating budget.
Okay. Reserves, again, when we did an analysis of your current situation from a fiscal health perspective, you actually already have roughly $7 million already in reserve. So we're putting $2 million to replenish reserves, but the reserves that we have and that we're utilizing are already in place. You actually right now have healthy financial reserves. I think maybe, and again, no disrespect to your past, before Viv, your past administrations, but there seemed to be, from my perspective, a lack of understanding of how to use grants, reserves, and debt properly. Where now what we're doing is we're trying to do it, but also replenish the money at the same time. But the reserves are coming from your already established reserve funds. There is no risk here. The money is in the bank and it can be utilized.
Okay.
Just to touch on that though, like I do think, again, going back to past council, past administration, a lot of the reserves that are in there too are for projects that weren't completed through the capital plan, which I'm sure we'll get into next. But again, it's not like we just have this extra money sitting there for nothing, right? Those were for past projects in the past.
Through Mr. Mayor, to respond to that, you have what's called unrestricted reserves, then you have operating reserves, and then you have capital restricted reserves. And so I will say that that is accurate to an extent, but there are significant amounts or significant reserves in place for the town at high level that right now did not have any dedicated projects against them or use. And so again, like I said before, unique opportunity that I rarely get to see. So we have an opportunity to be ambitious. Now, we were still modest in our approach with this. So again, we want to set you up for success because ultimately you get to make those decisions. But we are planning on using some of them in this budget.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, and also, I made some notes here because I'm not sure if I understood what I'm looking at properly. But I see that we're forecasting that the revenue would go down by about 2%, and then the expenditure would be around 6.1%. Does that seem feasible to you?
Ed is online tonight, so he's the guy who did all the detail. So when you start getting into the really detailed percentages, I could probably answer it. But Ed, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Tim?
Yep, there he is.
Okay. Revenue piece overall, some of it we kept flat, just to be conservative. And then for the expenses, the forecast, we used a general rate of 2.5%, but if it looked like there could be more inflationary pressure depending on the expense area, we adjusted that as well.
If I may, I think one of the key things is what we found was a lot of opportunity as Ed reviewed the budget for a lot of what we call right sizing, meaning that your actuals that have been spent over the last, say, 5 years were not matching what you had in budget. So we're able to reduce that significantly. So your revenues are decreasing, but because again, we're decreasing the tax dollar increase to your residents, but your expenses were reduced even more because again, we weren't spending that money. So that's what provided the net opportunity for us to be able to reduce your taxes. But hopefully that helps. It was basically a right sizing of the budget.
Okay, so basically, we'll be using the revenue in the event that we need additional funds until.
So very important thing is that from a municipal budget perspective in finance is revenue always has to match your need. And so the first thing you always do is you basically take a look at your expenses. So we did that and right-size the expenses to where we needed them to be. We then took it into consideration assessment growth, because again, assessment is real growth. And then we looked at what is the revenue requirement compared to the taxes, and we were surprised to find a unique opportunity that we could actually reduce revenues and still balance this budget and put money in the bank. And so it was a unique, I think, one-time opportunity that we probably won't see. And so please don't get used to it. But this was a unique opportunity because, again, your budget, for lack of a better way of putting it, was a little bit overinflated. Does that help?
Any other questions? No? Continue.
Thank you. Okay, your capital budget.
So just before you actually move on, so we have the operating budget first for 3.1 and then the capital budget is after. So do we need to make a motion before we?
Through your worship, yes, please.
Okay. To be completely honest, I mean, we received this just over 24 hours ago. So, I mean, I'm not sure, and I know you're pushing for us to pass this, but I just don't know if I feel 100% comfortable passing this budget tonight.
Through your worship, this is the exact same information you received at the previous meeting. Nothing changed. Yeah, there's no change. We just, oh,
I looked over it. There was some.
I don't believe the operating budget's changed. That's what Ed's told me. Has there been changes? Ed?
There was some changes, yeah.
Capital budget's changed, for sure.
No, I understand that, but I know just looking at, I'll have to pull it up in my iPad here because I don't have a physical copy of it, but there was changes compared to. Where is it here?
Yeah, we did some, I'd say probably more minor changes overall. But generally it was around, there's some comments that council had around, the lagoon dumping fees. We adjusted that, and the collections contract, we adjusted that. And then
Okay.
some of the smaller changes were, around, some of the comments that council had.
So there are the small housekeeping changes that council asked for. But again, Mr. Mayor, I can't stress this enough. If you're not comfortable with passing the budget tonight, we shouldn't pass the budget. And so we're more than okay with coming back to represent if you'd like. And we can hand the information
I
off.
don't think it's necessary to I don't think you need to come back up here to represent it. I mean, everyone else seems to do it by Zoom, so it doesn't seem that big of a deal.
Sure.
I mean, when there is
Happy to do that.
some changes, I would like a list of those actually consolidated and to see exactly what they were.
Sure, we can do that for sure.
Unless council feels differently, but with 24 hours to go over this, I just don't see it financially responsible.
I think one of the things that's very key that, and again, respectfully, the detail was reviewed extensively the last time we were here, which was what, 2 weeks ago? And the changes that were made were basically very modest, small changes that were housekeeping in nature according to Ed. But again, if you're not comfortable, not a problem at all. It's typical for us to pass a budget this way, but if you're not comfortable as council, not a problem. But again, I'd like to hear the rest of the council thoughts.
Like I said, I would just like to see a list of what was actually changed in there versus, I mean, I know the overall dollar amount did change, so that's where my concern was. So I wanted to see exactly what those changes were. Yeah, it's hard, again, 24 hours to go over this and go line by line is pretty tough when we all have full-time jobs, so. Council have any comments? No? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
Oh, no, I'm fine. I had plenty of time to review it today. I was fine with moving ahead, but
Okay, if you'd like to make a motion, council can vote on it.
I don't want to push anybody into it. How does everybody else feel?
Sure, Mr. May I ask, when's the next council meeting?
Monday.
Monday? May I ask if again, it's not a problem to defer till Monday, and if I could, I would be more than willing to come on Zoom and represent this if you'd like, just to make sure that you're okay with it. Because again, as I said, this is your budget. I want you to be comfortable with it. And so if you'd like us to reconvene on Monday, not a problem.
Yeah, again, I wasn't asking to defer it for, a long time. I was essentially expecting Monday, so, and I don't think we need, again, a full presentation on it. We've had it twice now, so I think we can just go over a little bit more in detail ourselves and also be provided those changes, and then we can have a few more questions from there and go.
Absolutely.
It'd be pretty
Be
simple.
happy to do that.
All right. So I guess, what's that? The table till the next council meeting. All in favor? Carried.
Okay. So I'm going to make the assumption that we'll be doing the same for the capital plan. So I'm going to just go through this, but I expect that this will be basically shared for information this evening. And then on Monday, I will clear my calendar, make sure that I'm open, and I'll come on with Zoom and represent the information for you then. Is that amicable?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the capital plan, one of the things when we looked at this, we listened very closely to what council had to say. And we wanted to make sure we had what we call balance in this capital plan. Having done this for a long time, again, helping support communities build their municipalities through capital works, which is really key. There's basically what we call the 8 key streams of capital need. They include things like growth, service changes, value add capital, refurbishment and replacement. The list goes on and on. And so when you're looking at a long-term capital plan, the key is to find what we call balance. And that means basically taking care of infrastructure, maintenance, taking care of things that were built yesterday, but also looking forward and looking at maybe opportunities to build things for tomorrow as well that are important for the community. And so again, adding to the quality of life for people by adding capital projects. This capital plan intended to do that. At the same time, also had a keen eye on your long-term capital plan, which again, we have to discuss with council at some point. So So that said, this is basically focused on critical infrastructure, maintaining your core services, and again, ensuring your long-term sustainability. They were prioritized based on infrastructure condition, operational risk, public safety, legislative requirements, and community impact. And I will say that one of my team came up and spent a week with your team and went through business cases and looked through the justifications and all those types of things before we developed the list. There's been a disciplined approach to the financial approach, and what that means is we did go through your financial statements, we went through your financials, did a fiscal health analysis, and looked at what would be reasonable from a grant perspective, a debt perspective, and a reserve use perspective. And I've done a lot of this in my time, and there's some thresholds that are important when you're looking at those types of use of, those types of uses of funding sources. And the capital budget that we have before you today is well below the thresholds that I would be comfortable with, basically from a municipal perspective. But I think the key thing also when I state that is that this is a capital budget that's the beginning, not the end. Your long-term capital plan is also required. So again, it's something that we're trying to make a capital budget recommendation that's ambitious, but at the same time, leave room for future decisions next year, the year after, and so on and so on. And so very, very important from that perspective. Funding levels remain, again, within limited, reasonable limits, again, relative to available reserves, debt capacity, and your grant opportunities. And so again, a good budget, a responsible one, but also one that leaves you in a very strong financial position. The capital planning principles that we utilize, again, is protecting existing infrastructure. So again, asking, was there anything that's critical, something that could fail? The worst thing for municipalities is when we don't take care of infrastructure to the point that infrastructure has the opportunity to fail. Because taking care of it and maintaining and replacing infrastructure is a lot cheaper than when infrastructure failures happen. And so that's what this budget was trying to do, is balance basically new with replacing and maintenance of the current infrastructure that you have. We were looking at prioritization, operational risks, and looking at what kinds of things are important to people from a safety perspective, recreation perspective, again, quality of life and core infrastructure perspective, things like water. That was all considered when we chose the projects that are before you today. And again, we do believe that the decisions align with financial capacity and financial sustainability. We did use debt strategically and responsibly, in our opinion. And I will say this, just to maybe make you feel a bit more comfortable. My company is the official education provider for the Canadian Association of Government Finance Officers. My team and myself teach municipalities about debt and use of grants and use of reserves. And something that I'm very, very adamant about is making sure that we use debt properly. And so the debt that we're recommending is basically the right way of utilizing debt. Maybe just a little bit of an aside on that is there's two key principles when we use debt. Is debt actually creates what we call intergenerational equity. And what that means is that when you take out debt, that means that you're putting in principal and interest payments that people will pay over many years. That means that if we buy or build, say, a new recreation facility or buy a fire truck and we utilize debt, that means that people that are going to live here 10 years, maybe 12 years from now, they're going to pay their share for those assets through basically the debenture payments that will be occurring. So the people today aren't paying for the full amount for those capital assets. And so that's a very big advantage in utilizing debt. The second thing about debt is that when you're ambitious and you have a good idea of what kind of assets that the community needs, it's called an inflation shield, meaning that we can procure an asset today by utilizing debt, and the interest cost usually is nowhere near the inflationary cost if we waited years to build the same asset. And the greatest example of that for me is I was part of the multipurpose recreation facility build in Strathcona County. In the year 2000, that building cost $27.5 million. It was 100% taken out by debt. And in the end, the principal and interest cost $42.5 million. To build that building today would cost $175 million. So that's where, by utilizing debt, you can actually save money over time if you use it smartly. And so that was considered when we took a look at this took a look at this capital budget. Again, we are continue rebuilding your reserves while leveraging external funding opportunities. So we are recommending some reserves using this capital budget. But as you saw, we're also putting $2 million back into the reserves. So looking at using, but also replenishing at the same time. And so that'll be a long-term reserve strategy that we'd be recommending for you. Again, why this is reasonable, again, we are carefully reviewing, we looked at your reserve levels and we looked at your debt capacity before finalizing. We feel comfortable with the amounts of debt and reserves that we're utilizing. We've limited them to, again, projects with long-term community benefit and infrastructure value. I'd never recommend debt for operations. I'd never recommend debt for maintenance of, basically basic maintenance, so like painting and basic fixes. You don't want to use debt for those types of things. Usually use debt for legacy projects, for things that will last a long time. That's what makes sense. So we made sure that those projects were tied to that type of debt use. The town, again, will remain very far below the provincial debt limitations, and so that's a very important component of this capital budget, and we will continue to aggressively pursue any grant opportunities that are out there. One of the things about that is that grant opportunities are, they do come up from a federal and provincial perspective, but remember, we have to always be cognizant that competitive grants sometimes are difficult to be successful at. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't be successful, and we should pursue them, but I want to make sure that we don't chase and approve projects that are dependent on competitive grants that may not materialize. And you have done that in the past, and then have projects just sitting there waiting for grants, and that's never a good thing. So I never recommend a capital budget based on maybe getting a grant, because again, that's just kind of a soul-sapping exercise, because if we don't get the grant, it can be a real disappointment. So that there's nothing in here like that. Again, the projects were basically not financially achievable at this time. We're deferred, and we can talk about that. But one of the things I take very seriously is the role of being a trusted advisor of council. That doesn't mean that always I'm going to tell you the things that you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you the truth about things. And there are some projects in here, one in particular I'm going to talk about, that just probably isn't feasible at this time. Doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. There are opportunities, but it's going to be very difficult to do one of the projects. I'm going to talk about that here in a moment. So this capital plan does support your broader financial recovery and stabilization strategy. It is continuing to strengthen, again, contributions to your long-term capital plan and forecast. We're not draining the bank and taking away future opportunity. Again, there will be opportunities for us to look at future infrastructure. So again, we would like to have the opportunity to work with you on that. And again, this is very much a capital budget that remains transparent, responsible, and meets your needs for basically financial stewardship. So again, the strategic message to your residents, again, this is a budget, in my opinion, that really shows your residents that you care about maintaining the infrastructure and this community from an infrastructure perspective. There are a lot of projects in here from a maintenance of infrastructure perspective. This also balances the realities of your financial position. This capital budget, if approved, can also be strongly defended to your residents from a debt, reserve, and grant perspective. And I'm talking about best practices with municipalities across Alberta that are considered strongly financially sustainable, but at the same time are in the process of building the community for quality of life. And so I believe this capital budget does that. Again, this does support the long-term success of the community and represents, I think, a practical and responsible path forward. And when I say practical, one of the things that I did say to you the last time I was here is I have been privileged to work in municipalities that don't just approve projects, but actually get them built and done. And so when I say practical, this capital budget is one that I believe is achievable. But that also means that if you approve the budget, we have to start hustling like literally the day after on procurement, on requests for proposals, on putting in project management, and making sure that we get projects done. And I've been lucky to be part of teams that are like that. There's nothing more frustrating for a council than seeing projects approved and not seeing them get finished. And so this capital budget is ambitious, but also needs your commitment to actually get us moving. And again, Viv has talked to me at length about that, about her want to make sure that we don't disappoint council with this capital budget by making sure projects get completed. And so that's something I think is worth discussion this evening if you'd like. Again, the recommended motions, again, as we mentioned, we're going to defer these till Monday, I believe. Monday. We would ask that you approve the capital budget as presented. Again, the development, that should say long, sorry, a bit of a typo there. Again, we will continue to pursue grant opportunities and looking at future capital investment, and that might be for some of the bigger projects, and we will continue to look at your reserves and debt capacity. And so there isn't a capital budget that I ever approve that we're not doing an analysis on how this is going to impact reserves and your debt. And so that's maybe helps with the question that you had, Councillor Burrell. We want to make sure that we have a keen eye on your reserves and your debt to make sure that we're not putting the town in a situation of future financial challenge. Okay,
Yeah, that kind of touched on the question that's
absolutely.
been nagging on me. So you mentioned taking out debt for infrastructure,
Yep.
but it's no secret that for a municipality to run, it's more than just one or two infrastructures. So do you still recommend that, knowing that beyond the infrastructure that needs to be built,
Yep.
the town still needs to be operational? So do you think we should take out a debt of X amount of money if the financial health of the town doesn't match up to that?
I think I know where you're going with this, but are you saying operational health versus investing money and taking out debt for capital?
Right. So
Okay.
if you take out a debt, you are left paying that back
Yeah.
for years to come.
Yep.
Okay, but then if we don't have the money in the first place, for example, if the town has $10, would you recommend taking out a debt for $50,000 to build one thing as opposed to whatever else is going on in the town?
So it's a great question and one that will take a little bit of time for me to unravel, but I'll just say this. The first thing, and if I'm getting your question right, is whenever you take out debt, it's very important to recognize that there's two components of it. You take out debt, so then you're building a project, but then you have the principal and operating payments, and so you got to think about your operating budget. So we've looked at that. And so we've said, okay, does this municipality have the capacity, not just to take out the debt from a debt limit perspective, but does it have the operating budget capacity to make the payments? You do. You, again, like I said before, because of the right sizing of the expenses in your budget and your taxation strength, because you have a very, very, again, strong residential versus commercial assessment mix, your ability to generate tax is very strong, which means you have the ability to take on principal and debt payments in your operating budget without it impacting taxes all that much over the next number of years. So from that perspective, debt doesn't hurt the taxpayer all that much, but you get to see capital assets built which support the community. So that's something that I think is important. But the other side of it too is that you're going to have to balance, and there's always a balance between daily operations and capital works. And one of the things that municipalities sometimes run into trouble with is that you have a busy team. I mean, I have to say, I'm acting as a SAO right now in the municipality, and I can't wait till it's done so I can get some sleep, because it's like every day there's something that we're dealing with, for lack of a better way of putting it, and hopefully you don't mind the pun. We're always putting out fires, whether it be a snow clearing issue or something's happened. And then when we start building capital projects, well, that puts an extra toll on resources within the municipality, and that needs to be recognized by council. Well, if we want to take on this capital plan and be ambitious and build the community, I think you're an ambitious council, we need to recognize we need the human resource components to be able to do those things as well. So is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. You can't be ambitious and then not give your administration the resources to get it done, right? But you have, again, a unique opportunity because you actually have good financial resources. You could get a lot done if you actually handle it properly, in my opinion. Hopefully that hit the mark. If it didn't, please let me know.
You answered. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So I've already mentioned this, but from a financial metrics perspective, I said very strong. I don't have to go over this at any length again, but again, reserves, debt, grants, you're in good shape. And that's a really good thing from a capital perspective. But again, I think we need to spend more time in the long term looking at your long-term capital plan to make sure that we're doing the things that you want. Now, I can't forget that one. So that's a long list, and this is where I think the mayor is right. This is probably the first time, I mean, you've had some time. This is a list that you've probably seen many times before, but I wanted to make sure that you have some time to look at it. So I would probably agree. We can defer this till Monday. But there's a real strong mix in this capital plan list. This isn't just a list that's just been thrown together. We were really looking at maintenance and repair, making sure there's some legacy work in here, that we're taking care of what we need to do from a core infrastructure perspective, water. And what I heard the last time, we're also looking at a kind of a legacy project, fixing up your main street. Is one of the projects that we thought would be an important one for you to see. The key thing that we wanted to also mention in this capital plan is that, again, as I mentioned before, we'd then like to start hustling very quickly to get this stuff done, which means we need to get that support from council, that it's not just a list that you want to see approved, but you want us to get hustling on the procurement, developing the request for proposals, working with the contractors, and start seeing these things actually get finished. I think a lot of municipalities, and I think this was the case here a little bit, get nervous about the use of funds. And that's what holds a lot of municipalities back. And that's why I think you're in the situation you are, where you actually have great capacity in your finances, but you've also, as I heard from council, a bit frustrated that you're not seeing things get done. Where understanding and feeling comfortable as a financial professional in terms of the use of grants, the use of reserves, and the use of debt means municipalities grow. And I've been part of municipalities that have done that for many, many years. And so I think you have a great opportunity here. So again, if you want to go over this list, we can, but I'd say probably take a few days to look at it. We talk about money, but I think this is, again, a very strong capital plan, one that's ambitious, but we also didn't want to leave anything out that you thought was a priority. So any comments or questions about the list?
Yes, I don't think that we need to delay the questions on this till next week. I mean, I think that there's gonna be some things that are hopefully changed on this. Obviously, there's been, I talked about this on the 21st when we had this first meeting going over this, and we had talked about reevaluating the 100th Avenue work, or the spec of it, because again, I had mentioned multiple times that I think, again, you also alluded to yourself, we had went into that in hopes that we would have a grant, and we are most likely probably not going to get that grant, or, in hopes we would, but there's high chance we won't. So again, like I said, I think there was a lot of wants in that project and versus needs. I think at the end of the day, the residents just want that street paved. Obviously, there's a lot more work to it there, so we can't just do that. But again, when we look at all the nice shiny things that are also included in that project, I think there's a few things that council can reevaluate and take out. So I don't feel comfortable going forward with that project at this time. If that means we have to delay it till next year, so be it. I'd rather do that than waste a few $1 million, to be honest. So the other thing on top of that is just the addition of the fire services asks in there. I mean, we're almost $3 million in this capital plan for just fire service alone. I mean, back in, this is before my time, but I know when we had $1 million fire truck purchased, the residents lost their minds. So to see an almost $2 million fire truck, I think people are, they might burn the building down.
I can pretty much guarantee the $2 million fire truck is probably the same as the $1 million fire truck. They've just gone up a lot.
And I get that, but again, we need to, I think, without council just looking at these numbers on this page, I think we need to also see examples. Do we need to see that there's proof that these things were shopped around for? Like, I know there's, again, when it comes to fire service, you want the best for the municipality, but at the same time, we need to be fiscally responsible when we make these decisions. So, go ahead.
Through your worship, I would like to turn this over to the fire chief to explain this.
Yes, one of the big challenges when we started looking at all of the assets of the fire department and what the current policy of council would be is that, well, there is a $3 million ask there for 3 pieces of apparatus. If we were to follow the policy of council as it currently stands, there would be a need to procure 5 pieces of apparatus, which would have a cost of $4.5 million because it's, combining the rescue one and engine one into one truck saves buying a second truck. One on its own would be 1.5 million. The second one's probably around 1.2 million in the current market conditions. That being said, the prices that are there are budget prices. It would be my intention to go through a competitive procurement process with all 3 of the projects up there to get the best value for money for the town. So they're very much a budget figure, but could there be savings as a result of that competitive procurement process? Absolutely. We just want to be conservative in what we're estimating and be honest with you that these are the needs that are coming up under the policies of council now, and trying to find some efficiencies while not reducing service. So reducing that ask that would be under the policy of 5 units down to 3, getting the fleet down. It's also going to reduce, operating costs and maintenance. But unfortunately, to go back to that question, the $1 million fire truck, you really can't get much for $1 million when it comes to a fire truck now. Since 2020, the price of fire trucks has doubled. And that's an unfortunate reality, but it's the subject of some litigation in the United States that essentially the fire truck market is 70% controlled by 3 manufacturers, and they have artificially created a backlog essentially of orders, which has allowed them to scale their prices up based on that demand. So that's sort of the market condition that we're working with. Could there be some relief with some of the stuff that's going on in the States with litigation? Perhaps, but yeah, it's just an unfortunate reality of the market right now that, you know, a truck that was $500,000 6 years ago is now $1 million, and the timeline for receiving it is no longer 6 months to a year, it's 18 to 36 months.
That's understandable. I guess what policy are you referring to?
There's an emergency vehicle replacement
I thought we had
policy.
updated that last year, last budget, because we had obviously dealt with a similar situation a few years ago. I thought we updated that.
Through your worship, I believe we updated the fleet replacement and maintenance policy.
So it doesn't fall under fire services?
The length of time for the replacement of fire service is actually much longer than the replacement of other items in the fleet that are actually shorter, I believe. In the new policy, public works vehicles is something like 8 years. A rescue truck is 15 years in the policy, and an engine is 20 years. And then the utility vehicles match the public works policy, which is, I believe, 8 years.
And so with the engine one replacement, so you're saying that one is 20 years old? Because I thought we just picked that one up a few years ago.
That was picked up used, so it's actually a 2010 model. So it would be due in 2030. Rescue one is a year overdue at this point. So replacing them both, particularly the engine before the 20-year point, we'll see better market value because insurance underwriters won't recognize that vehicle past the 20-year point. So the resale market for it to other municipalities is going to be much better if we are able to dispose of it 2 years earlier and combine 2 units into one to save that $1.2 million.
I think you had answered this question last council meeting, but when we're looking at potentially selling those 2 units, do you have a rough idea? I can't remember what the number you had told us.
I mean, it's difficult to say exactly where we would be in 2 years' time, but I would think that, you know, in the range of, don't hold me to this, but $250,000 to $350,000 is probably a reasonable
For both units?
for both of them. Yeah.
The next one here, obviously related to fire services, I apologize, so I'm gonna grill you a little bit here. So with the hazmat detection, that also went up $17,000. What can you explain to council what that is? I mean, again, like it's tough for council to understand that these needs and asks when we're looking at a piece of paper with a number on it, right?
Yep, certainly. So the previous technology that was used to detect a substance of an unknown origin. So basically you're called out to a spill and you don't know what the substance is that is spilled. Used to be something called dragger tubes where you would try and identify it through that. That technology is now obsolete and the tubes that we currently have are now expired. So the replacement equipment, 1 meter would detect solids and gases, and the other one would be for liquids to identify those unknown substances. We also have an agreement that we're in with the town of Rainbow Lake and Mackenzie County for the provision of hazmat services. So currently we're offering that at the level A, which is the highest rating or highest severity incidents. And to continue to do that, we would obviously need that equipment to carry on. Otherwise, council would need to look at changing the service level that's provided when it comes to hazmat response.
Okay.
Which is certainly within council's purview, but that would be a decision for council.
So is that just a general equipment piece or is that attached to the hazmat truck?
No, it's an individual piece of equipment. It'd be stored on the hazmat truck, but it's handheld detection.
Okay, perfect. And then we have where was it here? Sorry, the writing's really small. It just says EMS minor capital. What is that?
So previously there were a number of items that were being purchased through the operating budget that are actually capital items. So that is a combination of all those smaller projects. When we get asked to put together the project sheets, kind of the threshold we were given by Bloom was projects of $75,000 or more would have their own project sheets. Okay. Other ones could be rolled together. So a couple of examples of things that are in there. Life safety rope is currently expired that we need to purchase, as well as the harnesses to go along with that. Some of the power tools and equipment, saws and things that are just going to need to be replaced over time, rather than purchasing those out of the operating budget because they have a cost threshold and an expected lifespan, you know, longer than a year. These are items that are really capital items that need to be identified in a capital budget rather than just purchased without a real plan year to year through operating.
Okay. And then the $550,000 for EMS light rescue?
So I don't know why it's labeled as the EMS lines, emergency services. What it is the current rescue, the ambulance that was purchased in 2022 by motion of council. That would be due for replacement again under that asset replacement policy in 2029. We've had some feedback, obviously, about that unit from staff and heard some concerns about it in the community. So the idea there would be, again, to replace one of the brush trucks that's not overly used or that could be removed from the fleet without causing an impact to service levels, as well as that rescue unit that would be needed to be replaced in 2029 under the policy, as well as the air trailer, which the cylinders on the air trailer are designed to fill 2216 bottles. They can't fully fill a 4,500 PSI bottle. So combining those three assets into a single asset to replace all three to fulfill that purpose. And the other benefit of combining those assets is if we have a call at a town, because we do cover a substantial area, provincial highway, almost 400 kilometers, if the rescue unit or this new truck that's going to be a combination of the engine and the rescue were deployed well out of town, it would leave us a second rescue vehicle to cover off in town if we had another collision that required extrication tools, etc.
Okay. I guess just a little context just when it comes to this unit itself. The past council had just, was under the impression and were told that this would be used for extra, an extra unit to use for motor vehicle collisions. If there was, an incident on the highway, you had to put people inside the unit. And then, of course, if EMS wasn't a first response, that would be the availability. But it was never meant to be a full ambulance unit or a proper ambulance unit, which I'm sure that the budget doesn't even reflect what the a full ambulance would cost. But I do think that's something that council needs to evaluate when we look at what kind of service level we want to provide, considering there's no revenue generated through that program whatsoever. Obviously, when it comes to safety and, expectancies of the public, I think that's definitely something to consider. But again, there's a huge cost to that program for the municipality, and also obviously purchasing a $550,000 ambulance to continue with that service. So again, I think before council makes the decision to replace it, we need to have that honest discussion of what service we want to provide.
To clarify, it's not an ambulance we'd be seeking to purchase. It would be a light rescue unit, more of a utility type vehicle that could.
So what would you consider what we have right now?
That's an ambulance.
Okay.
Yeah, it would not be a similar piece of apparatus to what is there. It would not be replacing the current.
So again, I guess like if council could be provided some options of what these examples look like, I mean, it would make our decisions a lot easier on what we're trying to.
Yeah, I can probably just send you some pictures of some examples of what we're talking about. But it's more of a multi-purpose vehicle that can serve multiple functions, whether it's carrying rescue tools. It would probably be the primary responding unit to medical calls, but it would have vehicle extrication equipment. The air supply would be on that vehicle, and it'd be a redundancy piece. If the other truck with extrication equipment was deployed 100 kilometers out of town, obviously our primary priority here is the town, but we do have contracts with Alberta Transportation that we have to fulfill. So making sure that we have that redundancy back here in town to cover off the residents is kind of the idea. But yeah, more so trying to take a number of units, combine them into one, find some efficiencies, but not reduce service levels. But to clarify, what we're seeking is not another ambulance.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Just touch on that. When we're approving large budgets like this, usually we have a presentation with what these options are. Would we be able to get something like that before we were to approve these budget items? So pretty much what you're saying right now, with pictures, options, maybe some quotes that you have?
So what this would basically do would give us a pre-approval to allow us to initiate a procurement process before that tender was awarded. That would be brought back to council for council to be the actual body to issue that award. So you would obviously get to see the full detailed specifications, the bids that came in, and make a decision based on the results of that process.
And that's understandable. I think I agree with when it comes to the quoting side of things. But again, like I said, when we're looking at these huge numbers, it only goes so far with an actual visualization of what we're trying to approve here, right? So I think, if we can get a presentation, or not necessarily even presentation, but just something added to the package where we can see exactly what those individual pieces are, Because I think, you know, again, in the past, there's been some things that have been told to council, not with this administration, but, you know, there's been obviously some options that have been put ahead to approve for budget, and then whatever comes in is different than what we were expecting or what we were told, so. I have another question for, sorry, just last one for EMS. Sure,
Is there not
press
an
your mic.
sorry, is there not an option to get some help from Mackenzie County to purchase this vehicle?
So they are currently making a contribution through the regional service sharing agreement towards that, as well as, we do receive some cost recovery when we provide, assistance within the county.
And when we respond out of the town, we bill. In town, we do not. Yeah. Okay, last one for the fire chief. Again, sorry, I told you I'm gonna grill you. We have the squad RTV replacement. What is an RTV?
So essentially, because we're going to lose a brush truck, it's a smaller ATV, UTV that would be, you know, much lower cost to replace, but still maintain some of that capability and also give us the opportunity to get into some of the trails and areas that are less accessible around town, both for wildfire response mitigation, as well as potential that there could be medical issues. Somebody take a fall back there and they need to be extricated out of the trail system. So the idea is to replace that brush truck with something much smaller that has a lower overall operating cost and replacement cost down the line, while not completely depleting the capability that we have now. And the squad is a 2019, so again, under that policy, it would be coming up anyway.
Yeah.
And we're also eliminating one of the oldest brush truck in the fleet. The 2008 would also be combined into that, into that again.
Yeah. So is there not, like, I mean, we're looking at the other, because we have two WUI trucks there. We have the one single wheel and the dually. I'm assuming the dually is the one that the WUI team responds with.
Yeah, so looking at that light rescue project that we were just talking about, that also involves getting rid of the single wheel brush truck, would be eliminated within that project. So it would be the Brush 3, the current Rescue 2, and then the air trailer in that project. And the squad RTV project would be Squad 2, Brush 2, would be eliminated through that one.
So, I mean, just, again, trying to, you know, be financially responsible here, but, I mean, I understand it's a diesel, but could you not use which brush is it, Brush 3, I think is a single wheel? Could that not be used as a new a new Squad 2? I mean, it's essentially, I mean, I know it's a 1-ton diesel, but we already own it, and, you know,
They're
trucks are quite.
the same age.
What's that?
They're the same age.
I understand the age, but the mileage is much different.
Yeah, but again, just going back to the current policy account, without changing the policy of council, they're both due at the same time for replacement.
But I think that's something that council can reevaluate again, you know, when it comes to spending 100,000, 187, was it 87, 178,000? Well, probably over 120,000 just on the truck alone, when we have that asset already sitting there versus trying to get rid of it and obviously lose value. I just think that would be, I mean, if it's feasible, I think it's definitely an option worth looking into. Like I said, I understand it's a diesel, it's a 1-ton, not ideal for a squad, but again, when we're looking at saving $100,000, you said what, the tax percent was $74,000? So again, it's, you know, over 1% of tax rate increase just for a new squad. And again, for, you know, back to the RTV, I assumed the RTV was for an ATV or a side-by-side. You know, for how often we actually utilize that system, or if, you know, we had to rescue someone from the trails. I mean, from my experience, I know that's only happened a couple times to have to actually rescue someone. And I mean, there's rental companies in town. We have, you know, Northern Services here that rents UTVs that could be pretty easily accessible if we need to, you know, develop a plan with them in order to have one at a moment's notice to get there to go and rescue someone. And then at the same time, when it comes to this need where you have to go on a trail for fire rescue or anything like that. I mean, I just don't know if that possibility would actually happen, considering that's Alberta Wildfire's job, not ours. We're structure protection, not wildfire. So I understand it's in the WUI side.
It was more looking at it from the perspective of the town and the trails that we have around town and in accessible areas, like getting in and accessing the fire guard if we had a future situation, and with the street population that we're starting to see come back into town, whether we're going to have, you know, issues going forward in those inaccessible areas around town. So just the idea is, you know, we're making the concession of reducing the fleet by 2 brush trucks and
And I understand that, but at the same time, when you look at that Brush 2, which is, again, that's something that's been bought and paid for probably 20 years now. You know, that truck is, you're not gonna get anything for it in the market, you know, it's 2008. But, you know, when you're looking at the trails around town, you're looking at the brush guard, I mean, or sorry, the fire guard, that's from what I understand, a maintained fire guard around the municipality that is, you know, cleaned and groomed, so there shouldn't be much issues if you're even driving a pickup in there with four-wheel drive. So, I mean, could Brush 2 not be that replacement or that to fit in that slot category instead of having to spend the $55,000 to upfit one?
The current Brush 2, just to give some context, is in what I would say was poor condition. It would require probably $5,000 to $6,000 worth of body work to make it sustainable, and I wouldn't say that the value of the truck would be $5,000 to $6,000. So I don't know whether council would feel that was a wise investment to throw good money after bad. I think
Yeah,
that truck's probably
body
into
work is
life.
more necessarily an aesthetics thing, but at the same time, 5,000 versus 50,000 is a big jump as well. I mean, that's, again, that's over 0.5% of a tax increase. Again, just some things I think council should consider before we're going ahead with these things, right? Again, there's a lot of wants versus needs here, so I think we need to, again, reevaluate those before going ahead. But I appreciate that, thank you. The only other question I had, sorry, I'm not done, with the WTP pretreatment for 212, that's the study to see if there's anything else that we can do with the water treatment. So with that, if there is another option out there, the funding that we were approved for through the grant, is there anything else that's applicable through that grant funding? Or if we stop at the MIAX completely, is that grant completely gone?
Through your worship, the hope is to transfer the MIAX funds into the new treatment that will solve our problems. And we've been in conversations with the province, and we're just waiting for that report to come out and then see what we can do. But that's the goal here.
Okay. And then, sorry, I lied, I had one more question. The aquatic center. So we have the HVAC replacement on there, but is that just the boiler we're replacing, or are we actually fixing the HVAC system?
Through your worship, Myron is online. I will let him speak to this. Myron?
Yes, it's your worship. It includes the boiler, the air exchangers for the pool area, as well as lobby and dressing room area, and some ventilation units as well.
So does that also fix the issue of the ice buildup on the outside of the pool? If they
That would, your worship. Yes, that would. The work that'll be done will resolve that issue. There is a lot of moisture content in the building, of course, being a pool, and the design that's being done right now will alleviate those concerns and those problems.
Can you guarantee that?
Well, that's a tough question, but I've got a lot of I feel quite positive about the outcome. We've got qualified people doing the work. They have been on site, and they have a good track record in these sorts of things and specialize in this kind of work. And so I think we're in a pretty good position to have a positive outcome.
Perfect, thank you. That's all the questions I had for now. Deputy Mayor?
I had a lot of the same questions in regards to the fire services. So that really leaves me with one thought, and it's about the 100th Ave resurface. So I do agree, like the 5.5 million, I really want to see this project get done like as soon as possible, and I understand that we can still shrink this project in a responsible manner. But in the interest of getting the project done, and I'm not sure how this works in the municipal world, could we not approve the project and then through change orders shrink the project?
Through Mr. Mayor, one of the things we heard very, very clearly, and I was waiting until the discussion finished before I was going to bring this up, was exactly as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor and Councillor, that you're not sure if the scope of this project is correct. But that said, what the plan was to get approval, and again, if we don't if we don't use all the scope, we don't spend the money. But then we can bring forward through project management, the review of the project, the components of the project, the procurement of the project, and then come back and say, this is what we could do for this amount, paving first, whatever it might be, and then hold off on the rest of it. But until we get approval of the project, we can't go out and get the procurement and basically the cost of those things for you so we can make those decisions. So the plan was to get approval, and then come back with you with the project management and do basically the base, and then move up from there. If you want more done, we would do it. If not, we don't. The beauty of capital is basically for larger scale projects like this, through change order, through scope, and through project management, we would continue to come back to council to talk about the project and only get done what you want.
Yeah, because
So-
I mean, again, in my opinion, with us, if this is approved Monday after questions and everything like that, we're going to be approving the sewer work on the project, right? So at the very minimum, we would have to approve the street work, right, to repave it. And then if we're already doing that, we might as well continue with fixing some of the sidewalks and the broken curbing, right? But like, we both know, we've reviewed this project enough times, there's some frivolous things in that.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
Definitely need to go, but,
Yeah.
I think if we need to have this set out in the right order so
Yeah.
that our residents aren't suffering because of work that we're completing, so.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, CEO Thoss was very clear with me about this exact thing, that there's certain things that council would like to see done, but they also want to be responsible with the funding. And I committed to supporting this with project management to make sure that we could get this approval, but then move really quickly into RFP and the right planning to come back to council and say, now here's the project, here's what we get done, now let's get moving on this so you see some achievement. Because we heard very clearly, and again, I apologize if I heard wrong, you want to see things get done. So that's what we're trying to really push here. So again, very responsibly financially. So again, we serve council. All of these things will be coming back from a project management perspective. And again, you'll be involved through each of these. And so that's the commitment we'd make.
No, I appreciate that plan for that item there. Thank you.
I just want to touch on, it's like, I guess I just have a hard time understanding how, if we approve this project and then we're trying to go through the procurement process, are we putting this out to tender?
Yeah.
Because that's, then we're putting out to tender the project that we don't necessarily want to approve. Like, that's the issue I'm having here, because I think that there's, again, quite a few things in there that we don't want.
But it would at least allow us to, because with the project, there's going to be 20 different contractors working underneath that one banner. So if we can at least approve a majority of the project, then we can put the road works to tender right away, so that those are ready to go as soon as the sewer work is done.
Yeah.
The rest of it, we don't have to tender.
I think it's a lot more intricate in that, and I think that council needs, like, this council specifically needs to look at this actual project in the detail, like the presentation we had by Tetra Tech. I think we need to look at that, because there's a lot of details we can't just pick this and pull that out. We need to actually look at this and see, because there's probably, again, the whole design of that project itself, the roadworks, the sidewalks, there's a lot of things that go in that, and I think we need to look at that together.
Through your worship, I think it would be valuable to involve our acting director of planning and development to look at this project as well.
Absolutely.
One of the advantages by, and what we were kind of recommending, is when you approve a project, what you can do is you go to RFP and then you go to tender, and what can happen is, and what happens then is they can put in basically their proposals, then we bring them back to council, and then we can review the actual reviews of these projects. Until you have that, basically what you have is kind of guesswork. I hate to say that, no matter how much planning we put into it, until you get a request for proposal and some bids in, we can't actually come back to council and say this is what it's actually going to look like. And I've been surprised more than a few times on plans that engineers and planners have come up with, and then when you go to bid, it's completely different in terms of cost and things like that. So our hope was, and again, at no financial risk to the council, is getting this approved, putting out an RFP, asking for the components to be bid on, and then come back to council and saying, what do you think? This isn't a commitment to make sure that we spend the money, but it's a commitment to us to move forward with the process.
Yeah, I guess, again, the only issue I have with that is we're going ahead with procurement, or putting out an RFP for then contractors to look at this and then present to us, and then we're gonna go back and say, well, actually, no, we wanna cut $2 million out of that. And then, we're kind of back to the drawing board a little bit, and we're kind of, putting them in an interesting situation. I don't know if I agree with that process.
What you would do in the RFP process is be very clear and basically compartmentalize. We have paving, side work, gutter work, the beautification work, whatever it might be, and they're done in separate pieces. So when you're contractors come back, they basically come back with a bid. Well, here's kind of like the low end bid, the mid-tier bid, the high bid, and then council can choose which parts you want to go forward with. So the basic paving is really what you're after. That would be one of the things we'd say, basic paving to basically cover off the work that we're going to do after the sewer, and then come back to council and say, okay, this is feasible or not. And then we know if it's a doable project. It doesn't mean that we're committed to finishing or moving forward until council signs off on the end bid, basically. So there's no risk.
So I understand that part, and I think past council actually did something very similar when we paved 103rd Street. I don't know if Deputy Mayor was on council then. I think you were. Yeah. And we actually had a similar process where we went over the different options,
Yep.
what, we were gonna add a sidewalk here, how wide we were gonna go.
Right.
But that was all before we approved the project. That was before we approved the funding. We were gonna go ahead with it, but we decided what we were actually gonna spend on it after we had those proposals.
I can say that that's not the typical process that, again, from a best practice perspective, that municipalities go through. There is preliminary design, that kind of work, but again, then you're throwing money out the door basically for projects that may not get approved. And I'm not really a big proponent of spending money unless it looks like we're going to go forward with the project. And so through this way, you get qualified contractors that will put together basically bids on a compartmentalized bid, and we can come back to council and say, here's realistically what can get done. The big thing about doing that as well is that we meet the construction season requirements. If we don't do this, we're going to be a year again or more out in terms of getting this project done. And so that's why the approach is usually kind of a best practice. Still no risk. Like, I mean, if council ultimately says no to proposals, we're not committed to the project in any way, shape, or form by asking for bids. So it's just a thought.
I mean, I agree. I just, again, I don't wanna, I'd rather push this a year than spend an extra $2 million. We don't have to, so. I understand that.
500,000 and only spend
Yeah.
500,000 as long as we're just getting the road work done.
I understand that, but again, I think it's just still something that council needs to look at together.
And I'm not saying we don't, I'm just saying like, we just need to be prepared to move on this a little bit because like, this project's been pushed down the road for 2 years already.
But again, in hopes that we had funding for it, and we don't.
But now we have a great plan moving forward on how to treat these projects. which
And
is-
I understand that, and I don't disagree. I just, again, think that we need to be fiscally responsible when we are looking at $5 million.
Again, to be clear, we're not necessarily looking at $5 million. What we're looking at is approval in kind, for lack of a better way of putting it, to allow administration to put together a package where we could get qualified bids that would allow us to come forward and basically inform council on exactly what you're looking for. How much is this project actually going to cost us from a paving perspective, gutter perspective, sidewalks, the beautification, whatever it might be, and then council can make an informed decision to go forward or not. Either if you don't do it now, I'd be here, whether it's me or anybody else, saying the exact same thing next year. So either you do it now and get that information now to make a decision, or you do it next year and do the same thing to make the decision. That's of course your choice as a council, but you are waiting a year and you're actually adding probably significant cost and inflation on the project by waiting.
I don't disagree. Councilor Barley?
My question for you is, when we finalize everything and make this motion to go ahead, will there be someone in the background who will be looking for grants for these projects that we may get, like recoup some costs?
Yeah.
Because I understand waiting years for funding, it doesn't make sense we wait much longer, but then also, is there a way to recover some of this cost that's associated with all these projects?
Yep, through Mr. Mayor, this capital plan is already, going back, there it is, already has significant grants identified, which are grants in the bank that we know of. Now, you have a significant amount of what's called deferred revenue on your balance sheet, meaning that you have MSI and LGFF grants that are underutilized. So that's a good thing for us. I mentioned that earlier. So the grants have already been identified. So that is in this plan. So we'd be moving forward with that. What we call competitive grants, the types of grants that you're looking for, they usually take a bit of time to get. So if a competitive grant came out, like for example, was announced tomorrow, usually we have to do a very, very quick grant application, and there's a time lag of probably a year before that grant actually can be utilized. So for grants for the 2026 capital budget, for competitive grants, there probably isn't a lot of opportunity, but for 27 and beyond, there would be.
Okay, so sure if anybody else understands where I'm going with this. So if we start the project,
Yep.
are we not able to get some money for the project that's already underway?
Which,
For
Whichever project.
every one of
Whatever
these
one's-
projects that we're identifying has a funding plan behind them already. So we've identified grants, we've identified debt, we've identified reserves.
on this page here, it does show what is there. I mean, when you're looking at grants, the majority of them are LGFF, which is, it's not necessarily, I mean, it's a grant, but we get that every year. It's not like we have to really apply for that. It's just, I think.
No, you get two main grants, which are, one's federal, one's provincial. One is called LGFF, one is MSI. We get those grants every year and they can be utilized for capital. Then you'll get announcements which are considered competitive grants, hard to get. They're usually at the federal level. We would definitely, and maybe this answers the question, we would definitely be pursuing them, but usually it takes probably a year before you get kind of approval for a grant like that. So it probably wouldn't be for this one. It'd probably be for the next capital budget that we'd be looking for those types of opportunities. Now, there are a couple of projects. Obviously, you still have your large roadway project that's STIP. You've got recreation types of projects in your future capital plan that I would agree. We would look at all types of competitive opportunities for those types of grants. But this capital budget that we put together for you here are not those types of projects. We actually purposely put those ones in the future so we could look for competitive grants for those types of projects.
Just to touch on that, I guess I had sent that grant to you a few months ago regarding, it was a community, which was what, for the pool repair. Did we not get approved for that? Is it
CFAP. Community
Town of
facility.
Fairview had gotten it for their pool repair.
Yep, that'd be a CFAP grant. You have to have a community partner. Basically, is that one of those ones?
I can't remember. I had sent the information. Yeah, and I know we had applied for it, but do you know, obviously it's not in here, so we didn't get approved, or backstory on that?
Through your worship, I'll look into it and report back.
Because I think that was a grant of up to $500,000.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be CFAP if it's the $500,000 grant. Here's the thing I'm committed to. I've talked with Ed. We are, to answer your question, committed to finding every grant and every available funds that we can get from provincial and federal levels in our funding plan. It's what we do. So I can assure you that if there are grant opportunities, we will have explored them and we'll be utilizing them. And we're very familiar with CFAP.
Perfect. I guess just when we're looking at LGFF, I mean, that's used for majority of these repairs when it comes to anything recreational, it seems. So
Yep.
again, that's not something that has to be spent on those. If there are other grants available,
No.
we can actually save that
Yep.
LGFF funds.
Yep, LGFF and MSI can be used for a lot of different projects, and if we find competitive grants that we can utilize instead, we change the funding. So I will say this: there's many times as a financial planning. I've been a SAIL for a lot of years, but finance was my main thing for my first 10 years of my career. When we pass a capital budget, we're still always looking for funding opportunities, and if we find ones that were not available at the time that we passed the budget, we come back to council and say there's some more money that we found, and so we're always looking.
Any other questions? Councilor Mercady?
I am in favor of getting the road work started. My only concern is, say we go and get bids on this job and it's at $5 million, and then in 6 months we're like, we're gonna actually cut this back by $2 million. Will that not potentially get those bids to say, hey, this is not what we bid on, this work, it doesn't align with us anymore, and then we lose that?
I guess just from what I understood of what Tim was saying is that if we put this out for procurement, then they would give us essentially a few different options to choose from. Like top of the tier, and then, scale some things back.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly right. What we would do is, we would probably, if, again, just from my experience, for a project like this, we would probably, here's the bid for the surface, here's the bid for the gutters, here's the bid for the light posts and centers beside, here's the bid for this. So you basically have them bid on one project, but multiple mini bids within the project itself. Then we come forward and we say, which components are you comfortable with going with? And if you say we're comfortable with just paving, That's all we do, and they accept that. So it's basically the way that you do the RFP. It has to be very strict also, though, in the way that you approach it in the terminology when you're writing the bid documents, that they know that they're bidding on basically a multiple phase project, and they may not get all of it. They might just get components of it, and some will choose not to bid because of that. But on the most part, you'll usually get lots of bids on that. And maybe if you just want to choose the paving, that's all you have to do.
Just to touch on that, just so, I mean, I guess you're saying if, you know, they can bid on the whole project, but if you did have multiple people or companies bidding on this individual, these mini projects,
Yeah.
would that not make it more expensive for
No,
say,
not,
a company coming up here from out of town? They're gonna be charging extra travel and things like that as well on top of, you know, whereas a company would already be here doing that work, essentially, if they were taking the whole project on versus 5 separate.
through Mr. Mayor, definitely if you're gonna, they'll probably say this, if you do the whole project, we'll give you this price. If you compartmentalize it, there's gonna be maybe a little bit additions on top of it, but that's a choice that you make. Again, it's one of those things, compartmentalized projects are always more expensive than taking on the whole project. But at the same time, as you said, I think very rightfully, is that maybe we don't want to spend all that money. And maybe there's not value in the beautification components of the project and whatnot. And so that's a choice of council. Again, things can be done later, but again, as I always say in capital planning, if you wait, they're always going to be more expensive. That doesn't mean that it's not a bad decision to wait, but they're always going to be more expensive in the future.
Perfect. Councilor Byerly?
So my question is mostly for you.
Oh, okay.
So, what are we bidding on? Not bidding, sorry, not a contractor. What are we passing on Monday? Is it the entire thing as a whole?
The capital plan and the operating budget.
Right, so does that include
Well,
all the
expected
different?
to pass.
Does that include all the different projects? Because based on what I heard, we're not really looking for, what was that project? The road? The road, yeah, the road. So if that's in this, we're passing something that we don't want to have done?
So again, I mean, I guess
Yeah.
we're answering
I
the
get
question
it.
a few times.
Go
I guess
ahead.
it's just different interpretations of it. So from what I understand, we'll put out the procurement, which will be the $5.5 million, up to that amount, and then ask the contractors to bid in a phased option. So like I was mentioning to the deputy mayor, we had, a few years ago, we had 103rd Avenue paved, and we were presented with 3 different options. And so I'm assuming that's gonna be relatively similar. There'll be options where they just do the paving, then they add the sidewalks in there, and then they add in the, whatever other work needs to be done, the beautification, things like that. And then that's what they can present to us, and then we can decide from there what we wanna go ahead with, if we wanna change something on it, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly right. But I think also, if there's projects in here that you're not comfortable with, and this is typical of a capital budget process with council, we remove them and come back and approve only the projects that you're comfortable with in this capital project. So again, and project capital can be approved at any time during the year. This is a bit of a fallacy. Just because you don't approve it now doesn't mean during the year we can't do a capital budget amendment. But we are going to be missing the construction season on that one. Like if it's not approved soon, we would have to defer to next year because you're not going to be able to get the bids out and have somebody come in and do the work.
So at the end of the day, we put this out on Monday or the Tuesday, and they come back with some options for us. We can still stop. Like if it comes back and it's $7 million total, we don't have to go through with that. We're not signing a contract.
What you're passing now is not basically written in stone. We have to spend the money. Basically, what you're passing is administration's ability to then look at procuring these assets, and it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes councils will trust the administration, just go forward and procure the assets and get moving. But on bigger legacy projects, we often come back, just like on this road. So on a lot of these projects, we would get the okay to move forward, but on ones that we'd like to see come back, we would identify them, and we would not move on them until we actually go over the bids with you and the components and make further decisions.
Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to say, for Monday, be prepared with some information, Jason, because that's where a lot of my questions were tonight as well. So picture show and lots of information.
I can certainly put together a briefing note if it helps and send it to you maybe tomorrow with a little more
Oh, that'd be great.
information on the way these projects. I know they're individually on the sheet, but they're kind of envisioned to come together as a singular a singular go-forward option to, you know, at the end of the day, continue to maintain the services we have, but also reduce the long-term financial burden on the town. That's, you know, those are the two primary goals here. Is we don't want to see a decrease in service, but we also, we want to make this affordable and reasonable for the town, and also ensure that we're covering off our liabilities. Is one thing that I can tell you that's very, very different here from where I come from, is just the distance that we are from those other resources. When we have an event here that's serious, we're an hour away from any help. So ensuring, you know, maybe we're gonna have a little bigger fleet than some other places, but that's because we're so far from help. You know, where I was previously, if we had a house on fire, I could have 6 departments there in 12 minutes. There are no options like that here. So, you know, these are ultimately choices for council, but there's pros and cons, and there's consequences sometimes to not doing things. So totally up to you, but I will certainly put together some information so you guys can peruse that over the weekend, and we can have another discussion on Monday.
I think that would be greatly appreciated by council. And I was just going to mention too, in the past, I know, you know, especially when fire services is asking for these bigger spending options here, council has been invited to come to the fire hall, take a look what we have, understand what's there, what needs to be replaced, you know, explaining how you're going to essentially combine these two units to show the rest of council. I mean, I know it, I was there, but the rest of council has never been probably in the fire department. So it would be nice for them to understand that and see exactly what goes on and what our needs are and necessities versus, you know, everything else. So I think that's definitely something.
Yeah, and so the idea of this is, you know, maybe the past practice was to bring things here one at a time as they were needed. This is trying to give you a window, and if you know, if you'd like to see the full 10-year plan, this is really planned out over 10 years, and there are some rather heavy costs in the first couple of years, but once we get past that window, other than the fire station, there's really no significant costs for the next 7 years beyond that, out to 10 years. So, yeah, and I do think it would be helpful, especially if we're going to discuss that potential replacement of the fire station, which, you know, you've been there. I think you know that it's getting close to the end of life. It would be good for council to come and have the perspective of seeing the building so they can fully grasp exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, like I said, it's a lot of money that we're looking to spend, so it would be nice to fully understand what it is that we are looking to replace.
Yep, certainly. No, I can put some information together tomorrow, and I'll get it off to you folks for reading on the weekend.
Through your worship, we'll send you the briefing note, and we will also amend the council agenda to include it for the public to review as well.
I can't help but think the heat's on, and you seem to be wearing the right uniform for that, so you should be okay.
I had a question.
Sure.
So my understanding before this meeting
Yep.
was that approving all of these were just like, we're approving them, go ahead, go get started. But now my understanding is this is what we as a council would like to see happen in the next, this is our 2026 budget.
Yep.
But say we approve this budget and we take out the EMS stuff for now because we don't fully grasp what we're getting from it. But say he comes back on Monday with this briefing, we can then add it back and approve it later.
One of the things that I feel is very important as I get to know you as a council is we have to build your trust, number one. Number two is a different way of doing things because we want to get things done. But what I've also recognized when we look at this plan is that there are certain projects that are going to be approved but need to come back to council for basically endorsement. So we're not going to spend the money like the road project. So some big, what I call legacy projects. Other ones we would basically after tonight or Monday, if you approve them, we would move forward with your endorsement. That's typically what happens. But what I'm seeing here is there's certain ones that if you flag them and say, we'll approve them kind of, but we want more information, then that would be fine. In fact, we would say, we could almost probably put them in a parking lot, for lack of a better way of putting it, from a capital plan perspective, and commit to coming back before we actually procure and actually take on the assets. But it would allow us to move forward with investigation, get bids, those types of things for more information, so you can make, again, a very informed decision.
Well, because I'm very comfortable with most of these. We've had a lot of discussions about lots of them. My main one are the EMS ones, and I'm not saying no to those. Those seem like an absolute necessity coming forward. but we just don't have enough of the information to say absolutely go ahead with this. But the rest, we've talked about. We feel comfortable with those. So can we not approve this capital plan and then just say EMS in that parking lot for now?
What I'm hearing is EMS in the parking lot and the road project to come back with a
The road
bi-
project seems
responsible procurement and making sure that we get the approvals on the bids, basically is what I would hear.
trying to get stuff going, and we've talked about this one a lot. Yes, there's things that need to be adjusted, but what you're explaining seems like we can do that down the road. It's not set in stone, like you said.
I can say with confidence in the reporting process and the accountability process to council, we wouldn't be doing anything without coming back and making sure that we're getting things done right and through the reporting process. There are things that usually we get permission to move forward with, the smaller things we just move on, but on something like the road projects, EMS, whatever you're concerned with, we will be back. I think the thing that you said is honestly, I wrote this down and went back to my room the night after we met, was get things done. Was probably one of the big things when we re-met as a team, is like, stop not enabling council, but let's start getting things done. And so that's why we put together a fairly aggressive plan, one that's well funded as well.
So the pool, I thought it started. We've approved the HVAC one, and we've approved the hot tub and change rooms, or just the HVAC?
Through your worship, Myron, can you jump in, please?
Just before Myron jumps in,
Um,
sorry, Myron, 1 second.
Yeah, the HVAC project is 80% funded by LGFF. The design and specifications are just being completed. And as soon as we have that, we'll be going out for tender for that project and fast tracking the installation of those. So
So we're still on track for June, or?
Well, see, that's where I'm a little confused here, because I thought we made motions of that a month ago
Mhm.
to.
That's why I don't
fixing
understand
this,
why it's
so
on
I guess
this
I'm a little
capital
confused, yeah,
project.
why that's, I thought this was a separate repair to what we were fixing in the pool. Or did we approve? something else?
well, the HVAC project is one project, and the other is the repairs to the hot tub, which was also mentioned tonight. So the company was down and did a tour of the facility, took all the information they needed. They've got the specifications from the old equipment. They took measurements at the building and are just completing the design and specifications right now, so that we can include that in the tender package.
What did we-
Sorry, so is the boiler included in this, or was the boiler separate? So is it the boiler we approved a few months ago
Yes, the boiler's included in that,
in this here,
in all that work. Pardon me?
what did we-
in the capital project?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought we had already approved and made motions to go ahead with this. We were supposed to be on track for June, but now if we're not even, we haven't
Started.
technically approved the capital project, I mean, then what do we make a motion on?
Through your worship, let me take this back and report back to you and just review the motions
I
that
asked
were
this
made.
Last time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
This I
that's-
brought up last time we spoke about the capital project, and we were supposed to have answers this time, but it's still showing up as the same thing that we had made a motion on months ago.
yeah.
That's
I
why I'm
thought- I guess
confused.
from my understanding.
So
we
we've
were-
done nothing in the last.
Through your worship, I'll verify if there's a clerical error here and report back.
So I guess just for council's clarification, has any work been started with the pool repair?
Yes. Myron?
Yeah, they've been doing some work regarding painting and cleanup. There was some mold issues because of the moisture, so that's being taken care of. The design and specification work, it does take some time. You know, we've been pushing the companies to advance the project as quick as possible. We've said, you know, the facility's been closed for a number of months. And so we're doing everything from administrative side to get the project completed. And we'll continue to do that.
So are we still on track for June? Because that's what we've been telling the public.
Well, I'm hoping that it can be done by June. It depends on the contractor that is chosen to do the work. But I can have some discussions with the engineering consultant on the project and determine if that is a feasible timeline and report back on Monday.
Thank you.
So, sorry, based on what you said just now, I'm just not of the opinion, is the contractor already selected or not yet? Because you said based on who will be selected.
No, what we have, Lexus Engineering, they're the ones that specialize in, HVAC systems for these types of facilities. They've been secured to, do the design and specifications for all the equipment that needs to be put in. And then, once we have that information, will go in the tender package and we'll go for tender. The turnaround for that tender process doesn't have to be a long period of time at all. It's replacement of components and, tie into the existing system. So it's not like a residential furnace or something where you just get a furnace company to put in a furnace. There's a bunch of components that have to work together to control the airflow and the heat and cooling of the facility. So it is a bit more complicated than that, but we will be going up for tender. There are companies, a list of companies that specialize in this kind of work, and we'll also be providing that to local contractors as well to see if there's interest in this work.
Okay, do you have like some timelines for us? Because that sounds like June will not be possible. Like, how long does it take to go to tender? How long does it take for
Your worship,
all that?
Your worship, through the counselor, as mentioned, I will have provide some updated timelines on Monday once I talk to the engineering consultant.
So just for clarification, so I just went back to our March 23rd council meeting and we had a RFD in there for the replacement of the HVAC facilities, HVAC components in the facility. And it said that we had additional funding from 2025 through LGFF for $381,000. That's what council had passed and made a motion on March 23rd. So I guess now, going back to Councillor Mercady's question, I mean, I guess why is this in now the capital plan? And then I thought we made a motion, so now this is now delayed even further.
Through your worship, I will verify if this is a clerical error. We have a council motion that is being acted on, and then I'll confirm on Monday.
If I may, my team went over this list with your admin team, and if there is an error, I'll take full responsibility for that. That said, I also want to say from what I'm observing, one of the things that we want to commit to is as we start to get a little bit more, what I would say, ambitious in our capital planning, we also have to get more ambitious in our ability to project manage for you as well. And so I think regular updates, and so, because I can sense frustration with, is this project, where is it, whatnot. We need to get better at reporting and making sure projects are getting done. And so I think that's a very important takeaway that I'm taking away from this evening as well. So I will go and check with Viv as well. And she has, again, I will say this, she has told me many times that she wants to see things strengthened from a project management perspective. And so I think that's something we'll have to look at. Okay.
Were you wanting to make a motion to move ahead with the capital plan minus the EMS stuff?
I'm comfortable with that.
The only thing I was not comfortable with is just with discussion with the deputy mayor in the past was the backup hall generator, or the town hall backup generator.
Yeah.
Also, though.
Well, like what I had said kind of in our last meeting about this is we've watched this project balloon for the last, 4 years, and it's never been completed. I mean,
I think it's been long. I think it's even
probably longer.
prior
than that.
2021, yeah.
I can only speak as long as I've been here.
Yeah, fair. But I remember
But
being there before I was.
I mean, why can't we just look at having this building have a shore power connection, and then we have an MOU with a rental company in town for a generator? If it comes to that, they simply drop one off, we hook it off, we hook it up, we walk away. So we could turn this project from 300,000 probably down to 100 once we look at the changes of adding the outside connections, which they may already be there, I don't know. But it would be substantial cost savings.
I'm assuming there would have to be something, considering when we had the fire in 2019.
Well, there's a tank out there, so I would almost wonder if there is.
Because we had power to the town hall in 2019 when we had no power to the town. So I'm assuming there's something that was figured out.
Through your worship, we can definitely look into other options.
Thank you.
Your worship, there is a generator in the building right now. It isn't a large generator and it's not meant to power up the entire building. But it was there when the facility was the hospital. And you know, it has given some issues over the last number of years, but it is operational.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, going off what Deputy Mayor had said, if we can look into some options, see if there is a way to connect to something if need be, I think that would be a much more viable option, and then we're not looking at replacing that capital asset in a few years from now regardless, so. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Do we not have the original Tetra Tech package that we were provided still that we could funnel out to the
Yeah, that's what
that we could funnel out to the rest of the council so that they can have an idea what we're talking about as to the scope, because we're talking.
I was actually going to put in a recommendation at the end of the meeting to have that maybe brought to our committee whole meeting this month. If we can, council can have the option to go over that in a more informal, you know, situation, and then also the fire services replacement policy too. Look at that. Yeah. I'll make a motion on that after we're done here. I think there should be one from 2025. It wasn't that long ago that they presented to us. I think there's one from last year. Yeah. An updated one with, well, these numbers in there, and the split of the wastewater. Yeah. All right, would anyone like to make a motion on that? On 3.2?
That council approve the 2026 capital budget with the ones that we noted removed for now. Yes. Thank you.
All in favor? Carried. All right, so that's going out to tender tomorrow.
We know the hustle, I'll tell you, because I know you want it done, so we're we'll get her done.
Through your worship, just for clarification, to confirm, the rest of the motion, we are bringing it back on Monday?
Yes, for the EMS, the generator. Well, I mean, the generator, I'm not expecting an answer on that Monday. It just that EMS.
No, the reserve, regarding the reserve contributions and
The operating budget isn't approved. What my understanding
No, the
is
operating
that,
budget is not approved.
no, you'd like the operating budget to come back and fully be presented. I'll make myself available online. Capital, we can move on except for, we have to check the HVAC, the generator, the fire EMS projects, and Jason will be ready for that. And the road, we're committing that will be basically, we'll get the documents ready, but that won't be basically moved on until we come back and get your review and approval of the components and the bids.
Just to touch on the HVAC, I don't think we were excluding that. We would want clarification because we thought we made a motion on that in the past.
I agree, that's what it was. Wasn't it whether it's in a row, it's just clarification if this is moving along or not, or
But
if this
hopefully
has
that's,
been
I
repeated.
think that should be.
I got it,
in-
yeah, so.
Okay, so we're excluding EMS for now and the generator. Everything else was staying there, yes.
Could I just ask that be reclassified from EMS to fire services? I think that's quite misleading. Please and thank you.
All right, and moving on to 3.3, operating budget, capital budget, and long-term financial strategy. Was that part of the presentation still, or?
The only things here, because we've gone through the majority of it, but the one thing that I wanted to state is that when we put this together, it was in the context of a long-term capital plan. And I do think that this was an ambitious capital plan, but also one that was reasonable from a financial perspective. But we need to sit down and look at legacy projects. What are your priorities and what do you want the community to be? So there's some big things to think about. Trails, again, there's a new fire hall consideration. Recreation's a big one if you have a multiplex. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention is that as we move through this and we want to start getting things done, we have to think about financial capacity. And the analysis that we've done, I will tell you, and this is something that, you know, I think deserves some discussion tonight, but what may be also a bit disappointing is that the financial capacity of our town of this size for that level of project, the multiplex, it just isn't feasible. And maybe put this into perspective is, if we went to the maximum of your debt, which is about 23 million, drained your reserves, which is 7 million, used all of your current grants and future grants, which might be about 6-7 million, we'd be at about 35 to 38 million dollars. This is a 75 million dollar project.
Sorry,
We-
are you referring to capital side or operating?
Capital right now. Yeah, the capital cost is something that just your maximum use of all of your funds. And I mean, if you didn't do another project in any of your whole 5-year plan, you still would only have half the funding required for a project of this magnitude. I have been involved in projects like this in my past, and usually it's a cooperative projects where multiple municipalities cooperate together. And if that was the case, there might be an opportunity here. But I would say that you would need a cooperative plan and possibly a competitive grant, because they do happen on occasion, that would be equivalent to approximately 90% of the project cost. So basically, if I was going to take on a project like this and considering the rest of your capital plan, you'd probably be looking at affordability of maybe 10 to 15 million dollars maximum. And that would be a legacy cost that you would put in, and it would be challenging for the rest of your capital budget if you did it. So I wouldn't recommend anything more than probably 15 to 20 million dollars on something like this, and that would be a significant project for this town, and would mean that other projects wouldn't get done for the next 5 years. It happens on occasion, but that would be the maximum that I could recommend for you.
So I think I speak for the majority of council when I say this, but I don't think this council specifically expects us to build a multiplex with our current financial capabilities without the proper funding.
Yeah.
I think we've all come to that realization, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. But again, moving forward, I don't think that there's any reason for us to stop advocating for funding for it.
No.
Other options.
No.
I think, you know, this council has also talked in the past few months here about just maintaining facilities, because that's something that's been put off for the
Yeah.
past few years when we were looking at the hopes of this bigger building or this
Yeah.
bigger recreation facility. So again, I actually don't need to preach to the choir
No.
about needing this facility or wanting this facility. We understand it's not capable at this time, but again, I don't think it's council can still do their best to try and advocate for it and
Yeah,
look at other
for
funding
sure.
and opportunities when it comes to partnering with other municipalities as well.
If I may, I think one of the key things, Mr. Mayor, is I think that's a very fair comment, but also for yourself and the public. As I said, you have amazing opportunities to do a lot of special things, though, because of your you do have good funding capacity. And so you look at the ambition in this capital plan, and then future capital plans are very similar to this one. You'll be able to do a lot in your term. It's just, you know, a big legacy project like that is going to be difficult. That's all.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't want to keep you up too late, but I got just a few things to get through. Again, to polish this off, this all is in the context, again, of a long-term financial strategy and plan. And so when we step back from the work that you're doing in this budget, we are looking at still replenishing reserves, even though we're looking at using them. Again, we are looking at rebuilding, you know, basically your reserves, and again, looking at your future infrastructure obligations. And again, we're reducing financial risk. At the same time, we're building things. And so this is, in my mind, a very strong financial plan. This is tied to, again, sustainability. Again, we're looking at your reserves, good governance. But again, the thing that really hit me when we were putting this together was maintain and preserve the financial assets, but at the same time, get things done. And so, to me, that's kind of the theme of this whole budget, is simply seeing some real achievements in your term as a council. Again, these were the recommended motions that we had. We've already talked about them. We're going to be deferring some of this till Monday, but on the most part, I think, again, I would just ask for any final thoughts that you have on the plan that we brought forward, and I look forward to discussing this with you again on Monday. So I'll just leave it at that. Questions, discussion, or any final comments?
I mean, I think you've answered a lot of my questions already, and yeah, I look forward to Monday. I guess just looking back, you know, when we were talking about the savings and everything, I mean, we look at the assessment versus the tax rate. Obviously, everyone knows the assessments went up this year. So, you know, are we actually looking at an actual savings this year, or is it going to pretty much, you know, it looks on paper like, yeah, we're reducing the rate, but did the assessment take over
Through Mr. Mayor, assessment increases actually have no effect, believe it or not, on what you actually pay on your taxes for an average homeowner. And what happens is as assessments go up, if we still need the exact same amount of money, we actually reduce the mill rates. So, and for the perfect example is this, is the first house I bought, believe it or not, I'm old. So the first house I bought was $160,000. And literally 3 years later, that house, because again, it was in the late 2000s, went up to $320,000. So imagine if they took advantage of assessment, my taxes would have doubled, but that's not what happens. We reduced the mill rates basically to generate the assessment. What assessment's used for is what's your assessment compared to your neighbors. So if you have a nicer house and you've improved your home, then your assessment is higher. So you'll pay more than the average house in the community. But assessment increases actually don't increase actual end taxes. Growth does, but not increases in assessment.
Sorry, I guess maybe I misinterpreted. More so looking at, when we're looking at passing the mill rate for probably next council meeting, or, working on that for before June.
Tax rate bylaw.
Yeah. Are we looking at a mill rate increase or decrease for the budget for this year?
You'll be looking at a 3.08% decrease in your overall tax requirement. So people's taxes will be less. So depending on, again, it's a bit finicky with the math because assessments have probably gone up. So we'll be looking at what's your total revenue requirement, and we'll be reducing it to make sure that we get 3.08% less revenue from the tax holder. So on most part, people's taxes are going to go down.
So I guess that's just my question is the mill rate going to go down, or is it going to stay the same because of its?
It will, though I have to look at the math, and I've done a lot of that math in my time, I can guarantee it will go down.
That was my question.
Yeah, it will. Thank you.
All right, does anyone want to move that in for information? Councillor Forrest, all in favor? Thank you. All right, is there anything else? No? Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Some move for adjournment, please. Deputy Mayor, all in favor? Carried. Well,
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Minor.
Yeah.
have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, you too.
Good night.